This episode of Field Fare was brought to you by our friends at Backcountry and Beyond. Hey everyone, it's Brian from the Land Trust, and Lord help us, I'm your host for this episode of Field Fare. Hope y'all enjoy. So today we're going to focus on pork chops, hog chops, whatever you want to call them. This recipe really is pretty versatile. It can go either way. If you got wild pig, if you've got pig you got from the store, this recipe really is a pretty easy catch-all for almost any cut of pork chop. Really the only difference you're looking at when it comes to this recipe between store-bought pig and wild pig is the brining process, the preparation leading up to the actual cooking. And I'll put a description to that below. I usually brine wild pig for 24 to 36 hours before I cook it. It just removes a little bit of the gaminess, makes the meat a little bit more tender, and it's easier to work with. So the great thing about this recipe is that it does not take a lot of gear or ingredients or frankly technical know-how, and I'm all about that. So I preheated the oven to 375 and I'm gonna start prepping the meat now. We're gonna do what's called a reverse sear, which is where we're gonna basically bake the pork chops first and then sear them on both sides. I really like the reverse sear just in general as a technique for cooking, especially on like fatty steaks or cuts of red meat, because it allows you to really control the internal temperature and get it really nice and even while keeping it kind of rare. And also kind of allows you to have more control over the sear without overcooking one side. So all I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna salt and pepper it. That's pretty much all I'm doing for the baking portion. And I'm just doing this to be fancy. You can use whatever salt method you like. I like to sprinkle the salt because it gives you a little bit more control, and I also feel like that salt guy on the internet. Yeah, that guy. A little bit of black pepper. And now we're gonna put them in a well-oiled skillet in the oven for around 8 to 10 minutes, depending on the thickness of the cut. One really important thing to remember is if you're cooking any type of wild pig meat, to make sure to get that internal temperature up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit at least, just in case on the very off chance that pig has any kind of trichinosis. All right, folks, so this is about done baking. I'm gonna take it out. I'm gonna set it up here. Then I'm gonna let the meat rest off to the side here for about 10 or 12 minutes, just to let it chill out for a little bit. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna sear the meat. How we're gonna start doing that is we're gonna prepare it by putting a very liberal amount of seasoning on both sides of the meat, build up a thick crust. Do not be afraid of the seasoning, folks. It's very important. And speaking of seasoning, we're gonna use one of 2 rubs provided to us by our friends at Backcountry and Beyond. So the Blackened Saskatchewan, I don't know if you can see that, the autofocus gets that. This is a phenomenal rub. This is one of my absolute favorites. I'm a big fan of it. I'm a fan of it on fish. I'm a fan of it on more fatty steak. I'm a fan of it on pork. It's awesome. This is the coffee rub. This one's really good too. I actually like this on veggies, but I'm a really big fan of both. In fact, let's do half and half. Let's do this on one side, this on the other side. Let's get crazy. So we're gonna first do the coffee rub over here. As I said, give it a good coating. Especially with thicker meat, you got more room to play with rubs, seasonings, things like that. These are pretty thick cuts, so it's not gonna overwhelm it. And then on this side, we're gonna hit it with a Blackened Saskatchewan. I think this is just a really awesome, versatile rub. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that same skillet that we baked the meat in, and we're gonna heat it way up on the oven. Once that starts heating up, I'm gonna put a really generous pat of butter in there, coat the bottom. You wanna get a nice even coating on there so that it really fries up both sides of the meat. All right, looks like we're about ready to commence with the fireworks here. Let's drop them in. Oh yeah. All right, now we're fixing to flip it. Okay, so I've taken the chops out of the skillet, put them on a plate, and now we're gonna go to the last portion. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make use of the drippings at the bottom of the skillet. We're gonna let it cool down for just a little bit, get about medium temperature, a little bit, maybe hotter than medium. And we're going to make a whiskey butter gravy to put on top of our pork chops. So I checked off camera to ensure that this is in fact still whiskey, and it is in fact still whiskey, so we're good there. And we're gonna employ a technique in the culinary world known as deglazing the pan. So we're gonna pour this bourbon in here and let it lift all the drippings off the bottom of the pan. It's gonna cook out the alcohol, and it's gonna pick up all that flavor. And then we're gonna put a big old hunk of butter in there. What you wanna do is you wanna stir this around until the butter's just about to separate. As you can see, it's all kind of melting together. It's kind of blending up. That's about where you want it. It's good to stir it a little bit more, let the liquid go down a little bit, just to where it's a little bit thicker. And put it on the pork chops. All right. Make sure you got a good oven mitt when you're handling cast iron skillets. I made that mistake and ended up with a temporary tattoo on my forehand. All right, folks, that's pretty much it. So to recap, you want to take your pork chops. I use rib chops this time. You want to salt and pepper them. You want to bake them in the oven for 375 to 400, depending on how hot your oven bakes. You want to take them out, set them aside, let them rest for about 10 minutes. Coat them with your favorite seasonings, hopefully from our friends at Backcountry and Beyond. You want to take that same skillet you used to bake and you want to put it on the oven and heat it up searing hot. You want to coat the skillet with butter, and then you want to sear on each side your pork chops. Take them off, use the drippings and all that stuff that you collected, all that goody goodness in the bottom of the pan, deglaze it with some bourbon, put a healthy amount of butter in there, stir it up, get some gravy poured on there, boom, you're done. The thing I love about this recipe is it's easy, it's fast, you can use it to make food for a lot of people. And also, I'm done. All I have to do is clean my skillet, turn the oven off, and put my ingredients away. I'm Brian, this has been Fieldfare. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Go check out our friends at Backcountry and Beyond. We'll see you next time.